Well, welcome to Whole Bible Study. I'm your host, Tad Inouye. I'm grateful you're joining me for this journey through Scripture. We've been walking carefully through the book of Leviticus, a text that many readers skip over, assuming it to be little more than a dense manual of regulations. To the casual eye, it looks like a page after page of arcane instructions. But when we slow down, when we linger with the text, it begins to open itself. Leviticus is not a dead book of law. It is the living heart of Israel's worship. It is a guide for how the people of God related to Him in daily life. It's not merely a list of rules. It's a portrait of sacred life in motion. Up to this point, we've encountered the different offerings described in the opening chapters: the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Each has its own symbolic resonance, its own ritual procedures, its own way of shaping the spiritual imagination of Israel. In chapters 1 through 5, these offerings were described largely from the perspective of the worshipers, ordinary Israelites bringing something of themselves before God in the sanctuary. But now, with chapter 6, something shifts. The camera, so to speak, turns. Instead of standing in the courtyard with the worshipers, we move inside following the priests, Aaron and his sons, as they take up their sacred tasks. These chapters give us a glimpse into the daily life of the priesthood, their duties at the altar, their participation in the offerings, their responsibility for keeping the boundaries between what is God's, what is theirs, and what is to be shared with the community. This isn't simply law in the abstract. This is about structure, about rhythm, about how holiness was sustained in real time. What we discover is that priestly life was not a matter of privilege, but of vocation, a mediating role at the very heart of Israel's covenant identity. The priests stood between divine and human, holy and ordinary, sacred and common. Now, we're going to read a live reading from Leviticus chapter 6 and chapter 7 from the NIV version. And, all right, chapter 6. The Lord said to Moses, "If anyone sins and is unfaithful to the Lord by deceiving his neighbor about something entrusted to him, or left in his care, or stolen, or if he cheats him, or if he finds lost property and lies about it, or if he swears falsely, or if he commits any such sin that people may do, when he thus sins and becomes guilty, he must return what he has stolen or taken by exhortation, or what was entrusted to him, or the lost property he found, or whatever it was he swore falsely about. He must make restitution in full, add a fifth of the value to it, and give it all to the owner on the day he presents his guilt offering. And as a penalty, he must bring to the priests, that is, to the Lord, his guilt offering, a ram from the flock, one without defect of the proper value. In this way, the priests will make atonement for him before the Lord, and he will be forgiven for any of those things he did that made him guilty. The Lord said to Moses, "Give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. And the burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning. And the fire must be kept burning on the altar. The priests shall then put on his linen clothes with linen undergarments next to his body, and shall remove the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire has consumed on the altar, and place them beside the altar. Then he is to take off these clothes and put on others, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonially clean. The fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. Every morning the priest is to add firewood and arrange the burnt offering on the offerings on it. The fire must be kept burning on the altar continuously. It must not go out. These are the regulations for the grain offering. Aaron's sons are to bring it before the Lord in front of the altar. The priest is to take a handful of the fine flour and oil together with all the incense on the grain offering and burn the memorial portion on the altar as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Aaron and his sons shall eat the rest of it, but it is to be eaten without yeast in a holy place. They are to eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. It must not be baked with yeast. I have given it as their share of the offerings made to me by fire. Like the sin offering and the guilt offering, it is most holy. Any male descendant of Aaron may eat it. It is the regular share of his offerings made to the Lord by the fire for the generations to come. Whatever touches them will become holy. The Lord also said to Moses, "This is the offering Aaron and his sons are to bring to the Lord on the day he is anointed, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a regular grain offering, half of it in the morning and half in the evening. Prepare it with oil on a griddle, bring it well mixed, and present the grain offering broken in pieces as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The son who is to succeed him as anointed priest shall prepare it as the Lord's regular share, and it is to be burnt completely. Every grain offering of a priest shall be burnt completely. It must not be eaten." The Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron and his sons, these are the regulations of the sin offering. The sin offering is to be slaughtered before the Lord in the place the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is the most holy. The priest who offers it shall eat it. It is to be eaten in the holy place, in the courtyard of the tent of meeting, where whatever touches any of the flesh will become holy. And if any of the blood is splattered on a garment, you must wash it in a holy place. The clay pot the meat is cooked in must be broken, but if it is cooked in a bronze pot, the pot is to be scoured and rinsed with water. Any male in a priest's family may eat it. It is most holy. But any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place must not be eaten. It must be burned. These are the regulations for the guilt offering, which is most holy. The guilt offering is to be slaughtered in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and its blood is to be sprinkled against the altar on all sides. All the fat shall be offered, the fat tail and the fat that covers the inner parts, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which is to be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering made to the Lord by fire. It is a guilt offering. Any male in a priest's family may eat it, but it must be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. The same law applies to both the sin offering and the guilt offering. They belong to the priests who make the atonement with them. The priest who offers a burnt offering for anyone may keep its hide for himself. Every grain offering baked in an oven or cooked in a pan or on a griddle belongs to the priest who offers it. And every grain offering, whether mixed with oil or dry, belongs equally to all the sons of Aaron. These are the regulations for the fellowship offering a person may present to the Lord. If he offers it as an expression of thankfulness, then along with this thank offering, he is to offer cakes of bread made out of yeast and mixed with oil, wafers made without yeast and spread with oil, the cakes of fine flour well kneaded and mixed with oil, along with his fellowship offering of thanksgiving. He is to present an offering with cakes of bread made with yeast. He is to bring one of each kind of offering, a contribution to the Lord. It belongs to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the fellowship offerings. The wheat of this fellowship offering of thanksgiving must be eaten on the day it is offered. He must leave none of it till morning. If, however, his offering is the result of a vow or is a free will offering, the sacrifice shall be eaten on the day he offers it, but anything left over may be eaten on the next day. Any meat of the sacrifice left over till the third day must be burned up. If any meat of the fellowship offering is eaten on the third day, it is not to be accepted. It will not be credited to the one who offered who offered it, for it is impure. The person who eats any of it will be held responsible. Meat that touches anything ceremonially unclean must not be eaten. It must be burned up. As for other meat, anyone ceremonially unclean may eat it, but if anyone who is unclean eats any of the meat of the fellowship offering belonging to the Lord, that person must be cut off from his people. If anyone touches something unclean, whether human uncleanness or any unclean animal or any unclean, detestable thing, and then eats any of the meat of the fellowship offering belonging to the Lord, that person must be cut off from his people. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, do not eat any of the fat of the cattle, sheep, or goats. If the fat of the animal found dead or torn by wild animals may be used for any other purpose, but you must not eat it. Anyone who eats the fat of an animal from which an offering by fire may be made to the Lord must be cut off from his people. And wherever you live, you must not eat the blood of any bird or animal. If anyone eats blood, that person must be cut off from his people." The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, anyone who brings a fellowship offering to the Lord is to bring part of it as his sacrifice to the Lord with his own hands. He is to bring the offering made to the Lord by fire. He is to bring the fat together with the breast and wave the breast before the Lord as a wave offering. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast belongs to Aaron and his sons. You are to give the right thigh of your fellowship offerings to the priest and as a contribution. The son of Aaron who offers the blood and the fat of the fellowship offering shall have the right thigh as his share. From the fellowship offerings of Israelites, I have taken the breast that is waved and the thigh that is presented and have given them to Aaron the priest and his sons as their regular share from the Israelites. This is the portion of the offerings made to the Lord by fire that were allotted to Aaron and his sons on the day they were presented to serve the Lord as priests. On the day they were anointed, the Lord commanded that the Israelites give this to them as a regular share for generations to come. These then are the regulations for the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the ordination offering, and the fellowship offering, which the Lord gave Moses on Mount Sinai on the day he commanded the Israelites to bring their offerings to the Lord in the desert of Sinai. So as we move through these chapters, one thing becomes clear. The sacrificial system is not presented merely as a mechanical set of instructions. It is described as a way of life, a vocation, a divine calling marked by steady rhythms of service. Chapter 6 opens by returning to the guilt offering, but here it is applied specifically to interpersonal wrongs, theft, fraud, deceit over lost property. What is striking is the logic behind these laws. A wrong committed against one's neighbor is not merely social misconduct. It is a wrong against the Lord himself. This is not just an item of theology. It is an entire worldview. Now, Dr. James Tabor, a respected scholar of early Judaism and Christianity, points out that in Leviticus, the ethical and the ritual are intertwined. The covenant was never a matter of empty ritual or for ritual's sake. It was ethical to the core. Community and worship were not two separate lanes. They were one and the same road. Holiness meant righteousness with one's neighbor every bit as much as righteousness with God. So when someone defrauded another, the Torah required more than repayment. There was to be confession, restitution, plus an additional penalty, and then an offering brought before the Lord. The path to reconciliation moved from neighbor to sanctuary, from horizontal to vertical. This is profound theology lived out in daily life. A wrong against a fellow human is a wrong against God, and reconciliation must embrace both. This shows us that the priesthood in a different light. The priests were not only officiating over smoke and blood, they were guardians of communal repair. They ensured that the covenant's ethical foundation remained intact. As the chapter unfolds, we encounter fresh instructions regarding the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Now, with the focus firmly on the priest's role, a key element emerges. The priests are commanded to eat portions of the offering. Now, at first, this might look like a simple matter of repayment, as the priests were being compensated with food. But Leviticus frames it differently. These meals are not wages, they are participation. In the ancient Near Eastern world, eating with somebody was never a neutral act. Meals were covenantal moments. To share food was to share identity, to be bound together. And so, when the priests consume portions of offerings designed as, quote, most holy, they are not merely filling their stomachs. They are entering into fellowship with God himself at his own table. Now, John Dominic Crossan, in his studies of biblical meals, has noted that food in Scripture always carries meaning. Who eats, what is eaten, and where it is eaten reveals a community's spiritual imagination. Here in Leviticus, the priests eat holy food, and by doing so, they step into the space between heaven and earth. The Hebrew phrase for these sacred portions is Kodesh Kodashim, Holy of Holies. This is a superlative phrase, not just holy, but the holiest. Even when given to priests, these portions are not ordinary food. They remain God's property. Their consumption is a sacred act that requires purity and attentiveness. Now, Ross K. Nichols has observed that this highlights the gravity of priestly vocation. Every bite is stewardship, not indulgence. Every meal reminds the priest that he inhabits a threshold space where divine and human meet. And then we come to the fire. Leviticus 6 declares that the altar fire must never go out. Day and night it must be kept burning. Marcus Borg and other scholars have pointed to the deep symbolism here. The flame was not merely practical, it was sacramental. It represented the unbroken presence of God amongst his people. For Israel, this perpetual fire was a visible sign of consistency, availability, covenantal nearness. The priest's responsibility was to guard this fire like a heartbeat. So picture it. The still darkness before dawn, a priest stepping into the outer court. He stirs the embers, adds fresh wood, and watches the flame rise again. To human eyes, it's a small act, but in the eyes of faith, it is cosmic, mundane in execution, but eternal in meaning. Chapter 7 carries this theme forward with detailed instruction on the peace offering. What makes the peace offering distinctive is its shared nature. Unlike the burnt offering, which was wholly consumed, or the grain offering, which went to the priests, the peace offering was enjoyed both by priest and the worshiper. It was a covenantal meal, a liturgical celebration. Elaine Pagels has noted that these sacred meals laid the foundation for later traditions, such as the Christian Eucharist, where food, memory, and covenant converge. What we see in Leviticus is the architecture of sacramental theology already being built, fellowship with God enacted through a shared meal. Yet even with this joy, boundaries remain. Certain portions like fat and blood are strictly forbidden. These are not arbitrary food taboos. They are theological markers. In the worldview of the ancient Near East, blood was life, literally. To consume it was to trespass upon the domain of the divine. Now, George W. E. Nicholsburg emphasizes that the prohibition of blood reflects the reverence for life itself. Life belongs to God. Blood is his domain. Likewise, the fat, the richest, most prized part of the animal, was reserved exclusively for the altar. a gift belonging only to the Lord. The message is unmistakable. Some things are not ours to take. There is also a practical dimension here. Unlike other tribes, the Levites, the priests, had no land inheritance. Their survival depended on the offerings. Lauren Stuckenbrook has pointed out that priestly power was not merely religious, but economic. Overseeing sacrifice meant overseeing the flow of resources. Priests mediated holiness, but they also mediated supply, distribution, and systems. From the literary perspective, these chapters are often associated with the so-called priestly source, that the strand of biblical tradition most concerned with order, boundaries, and the ritual precision. Jacob Milgrom, one of the most influential scholars of Leviticus, argued that this concern for detail reflects a theology of holiness that penetrates every part of life. The repetition and exactness are not pedantry. They are pedagogy. They teach Israel that life with God requires attentiveness. And it was not just about worship. It was about rebuilding identity. Many scholars believe these texts reached their final form during or after the exile in Babylon. The temple had been destroyed. The people were scattered. But to write and codify these practices was to preserve not only ritual, but memory. It was a way of shaping a community for the future, ensuring that when the people returned to their land, they would return with their covenant identity intact. Now, rabbinic tradition carried this reflection further. The Talmud expounds on Leviticus 6, emphasizing confession, restitution, and repair. One cannot approach God, the rabbis said, without first making things right with one's neighbor. Rashi, the great medieval commentator, interpreted the perpetual fire as a symbol of God's eternal covenant with Israel. Maimonides, in the Guide for the Perplexed, suggested that the sacrificial law was God's way of redirecting Israel away from the idolatrous practices of their neighbors. Rather than abolishing sacrifice suddenly, God reoriented it, guiding his people toward a holier worship. When we step into the world of the Second Temple Judaism, these priestly chapters grow even more complex. Archaeological discoveries, temple basils, sacrificial altars, fragments of scrolls show us that these laws were not abstract. They were lived. The Dead Sea Scrolls, often linked to a priestly sect such as the Essenes, contain lengthy debates about purity, sacrifice, and the legitimacy of the Jerusalem priesthood. Competing priestly groups each claim to be the true guardians of covenant holiness. Nicholasberg and Struckenbrook both emphasize how contested these matters were. Leviticus was not only studied, it was fought over. It was lived, argued, and defended with passion. Even the language is instructive. The word korban, often translated offering, comes from the Hebrew root karav, to draw near. This is the essence of all sacrifice. To bring an offering was to approach God, to bridge the gap. This is why the fire must never go out, because the nearness is ongoing. This is why the food must be eaten in holiness, because the fellowship is sacred. This is why blood and fat are off limits, because boundaries safeguard intimacy. As we move into the New Testament, the reach of these chapters becomes even more striking. Early Christians, reflecting on the death of Jesus, repeatedly drew on Levitical imagery. Paul speaks of Christ as both a sin offering and a peace offering. The letter to the Hebrews presents Jesus as high priest, altar, and once for all sacrifice, a theological meditation that reimagines Leviticus through the lens of resurrection. Elaine Pagels and Marcus Borg have both observed that early Christian theology did not discard Leviticus. It transfigured it. The structure of offerings and priesthood remained in place, but the meaning shifted. Jesus was understood as the fulfillment of the very logic Leviticus had established: the nearness of God, the bridging of human and divine, the reconciliation of heaven and earth. And so, in the end, Leviticus 6 and 7 give us more than ritual detail. They unveil a symbolic world where offerings, meals, fire, and boundaries carry immense theological weight. Sacrifice here is not merely blood and fire. It is reconciliation. It is covenant renewal. It is sustenance and fellowship. It is about boundaries between holy and common, between divine and human, between sin and forgiveness. And in these boundaries, Israel learned to be holy, to be a holy people, dwelling with a holy God. Well, thank you for joining me in the study of Leviticus. These priestly laws may seem distant, but when we read carefully, they speak with clarity. They teach us that faith is not only a matter of belief, but also lived practice. But how we treat our neighbors, how we confess, how we share, how we make peace. Well, if this study spoke to you, I encourage you to share it, to leave a comment, and to continue the conversation. And join me next time as we move further into the sacred text. May God bless you richly, and may His Word guide you into deeper love, deeper holiness, and a deeper fellowship with Him. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next chapter tomorrow.